Dr. Alana Khan from the Jewish Community Relations Council. Dr. Katherine Wilson, Executive Director of the Zeidler Center. And the Zeidler Center is the group that got started last year with the facilitated dialogues after American songs. So she has a lot of experience at doing this. Now, from my alma mater, Dr. Irfan Omar, who's Associate Professor of Theology at Marquette, and one of his specialties is Islam and interfaith relationships and dialogue. Do I have that close enough? All right, thank you. And Bonnie North from UWM Lake Effect. You've all heard her voice, I'm sure. So we're supposed to talk about difficult topics, no politics at dinner. If we're here today, we probably don't believe in no politics at dinner. So, Dr. Wilson, why don't we start with you? How do you approach public conversations, whether they're small or large, about difficult subjects?
At the Zeidler Center, we like to have people not start with issues and facts and their beliefs. We like to have people start with their stories and with their values. And we've seen some really great results when people speak from their heart about their experiences and their values and how those experiences have brought them to their opinions. And what we see is that it builds empathy. We're not trying to make people agree necessarily, but we do want people to empathize with one another, to lessen the polarization that we have in society, and to exercise that muscle for civil dialogue.
Thank you. Dr. Omar, when we were talking, we met in the hallway before the show, and we were talking about the topic of this panel. One of the things you said to me was, well, you know, people say no politics at dinner, but we talk politics all the time. We talk about these things. Could you elaborate a little on that?
Well, first let me say the play was a little bit overwhelming. Being in the academia, I read a lot of scholarly books. Not much fiction, unless you count newspaper as fiction. And I tell you, I mean, I thought reading Freud was difficult, but reading this play, and I had the privilege of reading the script before I came. The question is, are we really avoiding the topics that we say we are avoiding? Or we just don't know how to talk about them, right? And that's the question. Topics in themselves are not difficult. How we approach them is a primary issue. And if you have another 40 minutes, I could talk about that, but I don't think you do, so.
All right, thank you. Bonnie, as a professional interviewer and as someone who engages controversial subjects, deliberately, what's your best take for a regular person, like me, in a conversation I have with someone about, let's say I had it about Islam, or where I stand on Israel and the two-state solution, or any of the other challenging topics that might come up?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is no alcohol in the interview. Having watched the play again, before I get to answer your question, I just want to say this is a phenomenal production, and kudos to the entire staff and the actors, because it really, even knowing what was coming, like you, I read it ahead of time, and even knowing what was coming, it still blew me through the back wall of the theater, and that's kind of what I ask art to do, is blow me through the back wall of the theater. But I'm kind of in a position where people come into the studio, or I go to them, and we expect we're going to be talking about difficult things. It's slightly different than sitting around dinner, but oftentimes I will be at a dinner party, or I will be at a party or something, and somebody wants to engage me professionally. And I've found the best way, most of the time I try very hard not to have an opinion, because that's kind of my job, is to not have an opinion. I'm supposed to get all of your opinions and place them out there for everyone else to think about and to react to. Our job is kind of to be that neutral voice, or to be the ear, maybe. And so I think listening, of course, I mean, we always hear that, it's so important to listen, but it's also how you ask the question, I think is so important. I try very hard not to be confrontational about things, but if I disagree with somebody's position, not because I personally disagree with it, because I think they're saying something that I happen to know is not factual, then I'm going to say, but I've heard this. How do you respond to that? And try to keep that dialogue open. Is that the kind of thing you try to do as well?
Questions of, I would say yes, questions of curiosity.
Right.
You're trying to get that person to talk again from their values and what they might have seen or heard.
And answering back too, I'm hearing you say this, is that right?
Right, instead of moving to a binary, all you people, these phrases that we have in our public discourse that are really toxic and tend to, trigger people, try to stay away from those kinds of, sweeping generalizations, because anytime people don't like to be generalized.
Dr. Khan, I'm going to guess that you have a job where you have a point of view to represent at least some of the time, and I'm going to guess you've been in a situation speaking on behalf of the organization, and it's one thing to be the person who raises the question about something that might be contentious. It's another thing to be the person to whom the question is raised. So I'm wondering, in the telling stories mode, do you have an example of a situation that's happened to you, or maybe a tough question you get regularly and how you respond to it?
I do.
Is it shareable today?
I'm thinking, it's going to take me a minute to extrapolate a story, but one of the things that really struck me about the play was the role of the third party, the wife, Emily, that she wanted to be helpful, and and overlooked trauma and sort of the extent of trauma. And it strikes me that we all live with our own traumas. We're all reacting to the things that form us. So I think that the role of the third party, if we're sort of organizing it as a triangle, as in there are parties in conflict and there's a third party, I think it's really important to have neutral parties to bring people together. And it's very important that they listen really carefully and don't make assumptions, and do what we all try to do in interfaith dialogue, which is to see the other person as they want to be seen. Not as we see them, because we can get stuck in our own spots. That really struck me, that she really thought she was doing a good thing. And she was overlooking how complicated it was for him. So I'll think about a story, because there are a lot of them, and I have to think about what's appropriate. I'm often in, I'm confronted a lot. I have a lot of people who get upset with me from, all different sides. And usually it is less about me. So I try to do breathing and be compassionate and be humble, because everybody's evolving all the time. In 10 years we're going to look back and think we were ridiculous. So I think there's a measure of humility and compassion that we all really need to keep in mind.
I'm going to try a real-life scenario, a brief real-life scenario, and I want anyone who wants to take a shot at this. And that's say you have a 19-year-old in your house who is both a little naive and maybe a little provocative, just wants to see how he can get you. And he makes a statement to you like, well, all Muslims are bad, or, Palestinians, they're horrible people, or public radio, we should defund it immediately. And you're not sure, how much does he actually believe that because he's heard it? How much is he just goading you? How would each or any of you respond to that?
Okay, I'm holding the microphone.
You
So
go
I'll
right
start.
ahead.
I am not a good arguer. As I'm in my age, I've learned I'm not a good arguer, and I have found great relief in understanding that arguing actually doesn't help. And so I will try to bring us back out to a place of understanding that everything is complex, and I do have teenagers at home. And actually, those sort of statements often don't come from them, they come from older people. So I would say complexity, just to back up.
I never try to question somebody's beliefs in terms of, oh no, that's not true, because I think that when people say big statements like that, they really do believe them. But I would say something like, that's interesting. Let's talk about an experience you had with a Muslim that brought about that belief, or that influenced that belief that you have, or some value that you hold, some deeply held value that makes you believe that thing. And then we can start talking on that deeper level of, maybe they say, and I've had people say, well, I've never had a personal experience with that kind of person, I've just seen it on TV, and that's an honest answer. Or I was mugged, and that means that I have this trigger response to those people, and then you can start breaking apart that belief of, well, there's, not everyone.
So you a little bit look to find out where the source of that came from, which I do with my son,
Yeah.
who's the hypothetical person in this example. So, where did you hear that? Or how did you hear about that?
Yeah.
Well, I think I agree with my colleagues here. But one way to do that is to invite, that person to say more about it. Let's unpack that together. Why should we defund, public radio? Let's say more. Let's write a 3-page essay.
Says the academic.
And you have the power to make that happen. So.
And I totally agree. You can't question. You can't just say no. That's not. Argument doesn't work. Interfaith dialogue, as Ilana was just mentioning, is primarily about listening, and it's not just dialogue partners. Art of listening is for everyone in relation to everyone else. So that would be my first response.
And again, I completely agree, even though I don't have a 19-year-old at home, but the first question I would say was, why? Why do you feel that way? And that's a journalist question too. It's the who, what, where, when, why. Why? Why is that something that you feel? Not judgmentally, just why? And then maybe we can go, you and I probably have this, if you read the comments on things, or we get comments in on our email, and oftentimes you will get these very blanket statements about, you're stupid, everything you do is stupid, and you have to be able to step back and say,
And don't forget your mother too.
oh, and your mother's stupid, and everywhere you went to school is stupid. I've been called some pretty brutal things, and I'm sure you have too. And so I think what you have to do is realize that it's not about you, that you're representing something, and that you have to be able to, well, you choose. In our case, you try to interact with everybody who writes to you or calls you, because it's part of the contract, I think. But if somebody's really being abusive, it's perfectly okay to step back and put the phone down, and then say, we're going to talk about this some other time. Yeah.
In a moment, I'm going to turn to you folks for questions, but another thing I want to ask the panel here, and that's, to anyone and everyone who wants to take this, what statement or discussion did you find most unfair in the play tonight? What made you just react like, no, how can you say that?
Well, I didn't see anything particularly unfair. I think I'm not a literary critic, so personally I had some discomfort with some mechanics of the play. But again, I'm not in literature. I deal with things of more, how to say, unpractical issues, philosophy and theology, that type of stuff. But what I would say is the play brings up, real issues. It's not fiction. And this morning I was on Yahoo Search looking for how to remove a stain using what's that powder? Baking powder. The first thing that popped up on top was how to stop the coloreds from ruining America. I mean, it's just on Yahoo. I mean, I don't usually do these searches, but I had to remove a stain. I was wanting to know how to use a baking powder. This is real. This is not just around dinner table.
This is the first time I've seen the play. I've read parts of it, and I, like Bonnie, I'm still feeling pain. One of the things that really struck me was the question of, and I'm going to get to a specific, what it means to be American and to be pulled between cultures. And I think that one of the moments that was so painful for me was when Amir talked about having that blush of pride. And I thought, no, I don't want to hear that the Muslim is confirming what people who hate Muslims want him to confirm. Like, that moment to me felt like I would rather that he didn't have that complexity. That was painful.
And I will say that Mr. Akhtar has, some of his harshest critics are Muslim people who say, who might even say, you see so well and your work is so powerful, but why do you have to put people who hate themselves on stage? And it's a complicated question to answer, and as he and I have talked about, this isn't unique to a Muslim American playwright. Jewish American playwrights, in a way it's the story of American immigrant literature, is that parents sacrifice everything to come here to get a foothold, and their children become artists who question all the values of their parents.
And it also strikes me, we're all complicated and we have multiple identities, and I think you're right that it's the process of becoming an American. The Jewish community has had a longer time to deal with it than the Muslim community, and the Muslim, it's a younger immigrant group, and it's so complicated. And I think, the Jewish community we have lots of art about it, and we still talk about it, sort of, deepening our relationship with different parts of our identity.
I have to ask while you have the microphone. Did you enjoy his little capsule description of the Jewish tradition of we question and argue everything and look at it from every possible side and every possible question?
I do.
Yeah.
I like that, yeah. I don't like every part of my tradition, but I love that, yeah.
I'm going to suspect we have some questions, though. If you have one, and I'd be happy to repeat it louder so everybody can hear it. Anyone with a question today?
I'd like to.
Yes.
I appreciate everything I've heard. I truly do, and I adored the play. I was a school psychologist, and I worked, with people of different cultures and religions, and I understand what you're saying about listen and don't be confrontive in any way, and I wasn't when I worked. But my concern is more when you're in a house party and you have or you're playing bridge with different people, and then someone comes up with a real strong statement like that, or even political, which is very common right now, and we have very strong feelings also. It's very difficult. I'm not a psychologist in that situation. If someone's in my home or I'm in someone else's home, I don't know the best way to handle that. It's very personal.
Any reactions or thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Katherine, please.
I think the first thing to do is to monitor yourself and be prepared for something like that. Elena was talking about breathing, and I think that's really important, that we feel triggered by these things because they matter so much, because we have deep feelings and beliefs about these topics. And so to be prepared with your own trigger. So people react in generally 3 ways. Either you flee, you want to run away, or you want to fight and move forward, or you freeze in place. And so there's other ways to react, but in general, those are the instant responses that we have. And so to be aware of that in your own body, like, okay, I'm feeling that right now. I'm going to breathe right through that. And then when I'm ready, I might ask the question, curiosity. And so, or you might just say, that was hard to hear, I want to hear more, something like that. So you are recognizing the own difficulty that you've had for them, so that they know, and then move to asking questions. I think it does take a lot of practice, though. It does.
So I don't have Katherine's skill, and one of the things that I have figured out is I'm not going to be able to fix this right now. I'm going to give myself a break, and I'm just going to put all of my energy into not saying anything. That is my practical skill that I've developed. Maybe later I'll figure out how to come back, but I can't fix this.
And I just want to add one of the things too. I think is tough for a lot of us if we hear something that we think is prejudiced, or we think is ugly, or we think whatever. It's very hard, I think, not to immediately go, "What is wrong with you?" You know, what is wrong with you for thinking that? And of course, that's not really helpful. But I think we all do it. If we hear something, you know, the N-word gets used, something else gets used, blanket statements are made. I think it's very human. I think we have to forgive ourselves a little bit for wanting to stand up and go, you know, you're an idiot. Okay, now let's step back. But of course, you try really hard not to say that, but I think we have to be okay that that's a natural reaction.
And I think close to your question is simply the dilemma we all have right now in public life is, how do you deal with trolls? You know, and I think of the sign at Yellowstone Park which says, "Please don't feed the bears." Yes, please.
So to follow up and then maybe to push that point a little bit, like some beliefs, some words can be very offensive, personally offensive, right? That I hear something and it isn't that necessarily, it's a stronger feeling than just I don't agree, right? Yep. It is personally offensive. So that's, so I guess what I don't understand is the balance between, okay, I have to breathe and therefore in some way accept and in some way legitimize that belief, or, right, by doing nothing, or it's offensive to me, so I'm going to call that person out on it. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a difficult balance. I don't want to subjugate my own personal values to somebody else, but at the same time, words and beliefs themselves aren't the enemy, right? You know, so it is difficult to know how to navigate that.
And I think it's constant. I think the navigation is constant. I don't know that there's any one answer for all situations, you know?
I guess I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but I feel like, I just feel like it needs to be more directly said. Like, I mean, I need to say, some ideas are offensive to me, right?
I think that that in our polarized society, when we are surrounded with the like-minded, that we have less and less opportunities to actually communicate with people who have very different experiences with us. So much so that, and if we do, it's usually in these very toxic kind of battles on Facebook or something like that, where it's all or nothing, you guys are complete idiots and we're completely right. So much so that I feel like we all feel offended, even at any kind of difference. That feeling of deep offense is the feeling that we feel now when we come in touch with difference. Like, you don't believe what I believe? That's challenging my truth and my identity. I'm deeply offended by what you said. That feeling is real, but I think we need to question it and learn to kind of, okay, you're representing something that I deeply disagree with. Let's hang in there. So that's what I would challenge us to do.
Can I respond to that too? For me, the breathing is, part of my job is to represent. So I take seriously, and I want to do it responsibly and with love and all of that. But not saying something isn't necessarily an option. For me, the purpose of breathing is that I will do better if I can relax those immediate responses and figure out how to be smart. And we do live in outrage mode, rather, you know, it's like, I feel like that's the dial we're holding all the time. Are you outraged or are you not outraged?
Up to 11 all the time.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And one more thing I want to say, I think that the model of being an American used to be, when I was a kid, we talked about the melting pot, and we now talk about the mosaic, right? Those are the different models. And I do think it's important that we know ourselves and that we dig into where we come from and our own ideas and our own beliefs. So I think the idea of we're all going to be neutral is unrealistic and not helpful, and that's a terrible world. I don't want to live in a world like that. But I think we have to be smart.
Do we need to wrap up? Okay, and I just want to make one final comment before I first thank the panelists. I think they have to clear the room to get ready for the one thing, and I know that Mr. Akhtar.
Okay, I'm sorry, I would love to hear your response.
Oh, did I cut you off?
I just wanted to restate and reaffirm what you said. Words actually matter more in the way we receive them. And this goes back to the point that Ilana made earlier about the text. You know, there was a lot of discussion about what the Quran says. Let me just quote you one preeminent scholar of the Quran. And he said, and I hope I'm not butchering his quote, he said the text will morally enrich the reader only if the reader will morally enrich the text. And that just goes back to your point. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
That's a great kicker, thank you. And I know that I speak for Mr. Akhtar on this point. No one wants to be placed in the burden of speaking for an entire tradition, himself or herself. That's just a thing to remember on either side of that dialogue. You know, you're one person, not the whole tradition. Thank you, and have a great night.